right, welcome back to the show. Today we've got Kris Bennett, who I know has done quite a few big, I think, Class A self-storage deals. So excited to learn more about that and about him. So, Kris, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So give us, and I know you said you don't like this. You've got a podcast. You said you don't like this on your show, but give us like a 30-second overview of what you're doing right now and who you are.
Yeah, man. So appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in and all that. So right now I run my storage podcast. I had a partnership. We broke up. I wouldn't say broke up. It just amicably broke up about 6 weeks ago or so, something like that. So it's passiveinvesting.com. If you go to my LinkedIn, you can see that and see kind of the history there. I was the managing partner for the self-storage division. We did went from $0 to $130 million in self-storage facilities across like 3-4 states. Class A, Class C, and everything in between. So that'd be Class B. And then, so that's what I've done. So I'm focused on my podcast and growing that audience and then kind of going from there.
That's awesome. Hopefully we can dive into that. And if there's anything you don't want to or can't dive into, let me know. But let's back up. I know just from seeing you, and we've talked a little bit, but I know from seeing you on Facebook that you went to the University of North Carolina. I'm a Tar Heel fan growing up. So
Sweet.
Yeah. So tell me start with college. Let's talk about that, what you did, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. And I want to obviously tie it in. I'm pretty open book. So
Cool.
I try to be straightforward with my audience and followers. So I'll do the same with yours. So no questions off limits for me. But yes, so college, I went to school later in life, went to UNC Chapel Hill. Just to make a very long story short, went to UNC Chapel Hill in like my early 30s or so as an undergrad, not to get in master's or PhD or anything like that. I had no prior college education except for going to a Christian Bible school in my early 20s. That was really it. So went to UNC Chapel Hill. I got into school. I was a non-traditional student, being older, had a son already. So he was 2 when we went there, had my second son born while I was a student there. The day he was born, was there that night studying for my econ exam, which was the next day, and went to go take the exam and then went back home to be with the baby. So believe it or not, I kind of like at the time I wasn't thinking straight, but I had to like go take the exam. Now I probably would have just skipped it, taken it a different day because I just had a baby, literally. So he's a Tar Heel baby. And then they have a business school there, one of the best business schools in the U.S., if not the world. It's a wonderful place. It's awesome, actually. I applied to business school. I originally went to school to do mathematical decision science. So it's super nerdy Asian math stuff. I'm half Korean. I know you guys are listening to the podcast. You can't see me, so I can say that. It's like just, bro, like seriously, like nerd Asian math, mathematical decision science, which is awesome. But I realized it's not for me. I like other things, business, etc. So I switched my majors to econ and then applied to the business school, got into the business school. They have a real estate fund there that they allocate capital from LPs, real limited partners who are friends and family of the school, and into a fund. So we were on Fund 3. I applied to the fund. I went through the application process, grueling process, got in. So I was a fund manager. And so I was exposed really during my time in school of like, hey, you can go and raise money to buy deals. My first internship. So, bro, let me back up a little bit more for your audience. I got started in real estate in 2007 doing residential brokerage. So if you remember back to then, it was the recession, what hit in 2008. I was doing foreclosure work. So I would literally go and kick people out of their homes, change the locks on the homes with the sheriff's deputy, change the locks on the homes, and then get the house ready to be put back on the market with the bank. Sounds like an interesting job because you have like firsthand looks at investment properties. But back then, no one was buying unless you had cash. It was just a horrible time. So that was my first real taste of real estate, and I hated it. That's why I wanted to go do just something completely unrelated. I wanted nothing to do with real estate. I was single at the time, no kids. I mean, I've seen plenty of families kicked out on the street as a result. And not, it is what it is. You got to pay the rent, but it's just hard. So anyway, went to school. The only internship I could find, only job in the summer I could find was working for a guy who was buying multifamily properties. So it was real estate, but I didn't know multifamily. Nobody I knew did that. They all did single family. You buy, you fix it up a little bit, you rent it, refi it, and repeat, right? It was like Burr strategy that Brandon Turner made famous before it was even called the Burr strategy. That's what they were doing back then. So that's all I knew. I was like, what the heck? Like, he was buying a portfolio of 16 multifamily properties, call it on average of like 150 to 200 units each in the Carolinas. And I was like, how in the world is this guy getting the money to do this? Because it was like $100 million plus deal. I'd never seen that many zeros in a purchase price. I had never seen that many zeros in expenses, like how much expenses there were. Like, oh my gosh. And I realized, okay, on a per like unit basis, it was on average, call it, I don't know, he was paying like I don't remember the number, 150 a door or unit. And I realized, oh my gosh, these are like individual homes is what he's buying here. This makes sense. Everybody I knew before would buy one house and then buy another house and then like one at a time. And you had like 5 houses and you felt you were a king, but this guy's buying all this at one time. That's amazing. And then where's he getting the money to do this? And then I realized, oh, he's raising money. It's not his money. And I saw the fund like documents, and it's just the light bulbs went on. So you talk about a pivotal moment and all that. That was a pivotal moment for me. I realized this is how commercial real estate is done. This is how multifamily investing is done. This is what I want to do. So that got me like excited about the possibilities. I applied to the fund at the school, and that was a tremendous experience. We invested in everything from retail, multifamily, self-storage, hotel. I think we did a hospitality. I don't remember correctly, but like we did a number of different types of deals. And so that's what I knew I wanted to do after graduating. And I remember being in school, like, how the heck do we do this? Like as students, how do we do this? I would call like an apartment complex owner nearby, like, hey, can I come talk to you? Like, how do you do this? Nobody really called me back, but I would like leave messages and try to bug people on how to get into this type of business. So that was my beginning, foray, I guess you'd say, into the world of real estate investing from single family to multifamily. And then there's another pivot from self-storage, but that was a much longer than 30 seconds. And that's why I don't do it on mine, because they talk forever, just like I just did. So
no, that was all good. And I want to dive into all that. My first question is, how were you in school, college with kids? How did you schedule it?
That was extremely difficult. I can't tell you. Looking back, I don't know how we did that either. So my wife and I, we got married in 2009. I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Before that, I went to community college. So I did 2 years community college. I graduated with my Associate of Science. Make sure it's Associate of Science, not Associate of Arts. I did extra credit. So, but it was all math stuff. So I went to school. The reason I went to school is I had gotten laid off. I got fired from a job working in new home sales. They hired, it was Ryan Homes, great company to work for, great training. By the way, if you worked for Ryan, you could get hired almost anywhere else because they have like some of the best at the time. They had some of the best training for new home salespeople out there, but there just wasn't a market. Like they hired 4 of us at the beginning of the summer and then sent us to Reston, Virginia, to get trained. I think that's their headquarters or whatever. But anyway, and then laid 4 of us off at the end. Me, 2 others, and then 1 other salesperson. Laid us off at the end of the summer. So literally had a job for 4 months. And I was like, I can't, this sucks. Like there's nothing going on in housing. I didn't want to do the foreclosure work. Looking back, we should have bought everything we could possibly have bought, but hindsight's 2020. There's some horror stories back then. So anyway, so I went to community college because I'm like, I need to get an education. I had no other education, no other job prospects. And I know the audience is like, well, you should have just went to, I get it. Like I should have gone into business for myself. You could buy a condo in downtown Charlotte on like the 10th floor of a building that oversaw the Panther Stadium football team for like under $200,000 at that time. Now there's it's nuts. So yes, you're right. I should have went into real estate investing. All I knew was kicking people out of homes. That's all I knew from that world. And then buying one home at a time, which didn't seem very appealing to me. So I went to community college, graduated. That was already tough. And when we went to Carolina, I didn't know. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that's why you do it, right? And so you see those movies where they say, oh, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. And they're like, oh, we're going to do it anyway. And then like that's part of the story is like not realizing what they're getting themselves into. That was us, not realizing what I got myself into going to Carolina. It's enough going to college, but then going to like Carolina, it's different. It's a different animal. So my wife was very gracious. Obviously, we were flat broke. She was working part-time with the one child, and then we had him in daycare. I mean, we had a lot of assistance. They have financial help they have actually student housing on campus.
Oh, really?
So yeah, for people with families. So mostly like MBA and PhD students to live there with their, families, kids and stuff like that. So that's who we were kind of surrounded by. But it was really tough. It was tough for my wife because she was very lonely. She felt lonely
Yeah.
during the day. It was a very down time for her. She talks about some of that, having postpartum depression, and you know, and I was kind of oblivious to it because every day, like, I was having to get work done, study, whatever, projects, etc. And it was a very difficult time for us. But we got through it, and with a lot of support and obviously, you know, help from others. But yeah, it was extremely stressful.
Yeah. Well, and saying you, and I've got an opinion on this, but we don't have to go on my opinion if we don't get there. But if you, so you've got kids, obviously.
Yeah.
They're a little bit older now. You went through college. Obviously, your college experience is way different than mine.
Yeah.
How do you feel about college for your kids? What would you like to see them do?
It's a must.
Is it?
It's an absolute must. So all the circles, I have a completely, and I understand, you know, it's okay to have a different opinion. I think you should.
Yeah.
I think I disagree with Grant Cardone, Gary Vaynerchuk, everybody else who's an influencer in this space who says college is a waste of time or a scam or whatever. It's completely wrong. There are trade-offs with everything that you do. If you do something, the quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes here, the right way, it's not a waste of time. Yep. So I remember sitting in the student union building close to graduation time, and overhearing a student at the table next to me saying what he was going to do, his plans for after graduating. He's going to go home and live with his parents for a while. And it blew me away because I was like, what did you do here the entire time? You're at one of the best universities in the US.
Well, you were older and more mature than him too.
Exactly. Right? That's what I was going to say that too. I was going to say that as well. They have if your goal is to come in and party, I guess you achieve that goal. I don't know.
Right.
But you wasted your time because you should be saying, I'm going to go home, stay with my parents for a little while, then go work my job because I'm getting a job, you know, wherever. It wasn't like the job market was tough when I graduated either. I know there's ebbs and flows to that. And some years it's worse than others. I get that. You can't do anything about that. I understand. But people can say the same thing about going to trade school. You know, what's his name? Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs. I agree with the sentiment that, yes, the university education and college education is not for everybody. I agree. The military is not for everybody. Trade school is not for everybody. Owning a business is not for everybody. Being an employee is not for everybody. You can say that about anything. Being an employee can suck if you're not good at being an employee, right? Being an entrepreneur can really suck because now you're going from working 40 hours a week to working 80 because you're running your own business and everything relies on you. And there's tons of stress. Waking up in the middle of the night because you got to pay your bills and you don't realize, oh, shoot, we got to get that thing because whatever. And like, that's stress, you know? So not everybody's cut out for that stuff. So yeah, college, going back to the college question, I did it right. And it was partly because I had more at stake, right? I had a family. Yeah. So if you're going to do that with a family, you got to make it worth the time and effort, which I did. I went and took advantage of every career counseling source that they had. I reached out to potential employers to grab coffee, to do mock interviews, to do resume preps and reviews. I went on like career treks to like Charlotte. It's in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I went to like Charlotte and Raleigh, different places. We want to stay in North Carolina. So I didn't want to go to New York or somewhere else or Atlanta or whatever. So we try to stay, but I went on career treks. So they go and they meet with like different companies. I saw who was coming in to interview, like they'd have an interview day with different companies or with one company or whatever. And I saw who was coming in to interview, or at least I would reach out to the recruiting company and I would say who's coming in, and I try to find them on LinkedIn and send them a message ahead of time. Right. So I tried to put myself in a position to win. I also worked hard. I didn't get 3.0 GPA. When I went to Carolina, I got like a 2 point something because it was just so difficult. I didn't have time to study the way I wanted to. So it wasn't very good. I got a D in one of my business classes. It just is, you know? So, but I put myself in a position to win and to do well afterward. And I got hit so many times, man. I'll tell your listeners, like being older, you stick out at a university like that, you stick out like a sore thumb. Right. And so when I met with several potential employers for interviews, they asked me in either roundabout or direct ways how old I was, which is, you think like labor laws and all that stuff. Like, could I have sued some people? Probably. Could I have scared them with a lawsuit? Most definitely. I actually did pursue that with one. I'll keep it just, usually you can ask me anything, but I'll just keep it kind of high level now. But yeah, so one in particular asked me how old I was, point blank. And then It's a wild interview. Anyway, the point is yeah, it not like it was easy. Just because I was doing the work, was a big outlier. I didn't fit the mold at all for like an analyst role or whatever, like a coffee getter. Because when you come out, you're like the analyst, so you're basically getting like all the leftover work that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
So they can't picture like a 30-year-old doing that type of work. So it wasn't easy at all. I never had anything handed to me. So that's quite contrary. I worked my tail off to succeed. And if you do it right, it can be very successful, but not everybody is built for college, trade school, to be an entrepreneur or an employee,
Yeah. So how do you prepare your kids? Because to me, I mean, you went to college to acquire skill sets.
Yeah.
I went to college because I didn't know where else to go. That's what everyone else was doing. I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to continue to play basketball, like all for probably the wrong reasons. Now, socially and meeting, great friends for life is definitely a huge plus. But as far as skill sets, I didn't pick many up, and I wasn't there for that. And my mentality wasn't there. So how do you get your 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids, on the path for that? Or do you say, hey, maybe you should wait 4 or 5 years before you go?
I think that's a great, what you just said, that last part. If they're not ready, go work, right? Go try a couple things. Go work for whomever. If you think you want to be whatever the heck it is, attorney or something, I don't know. I'm just picking something out of a hat, right? An accountant, or you like working in rental properties, real estate or whatever. Go find a broker, shadow them for a week, go work for them. Go find whoever it is that you think you might want to do and go do that work for a week or two. And see what it's like, or for a year or more, or whatever it is. Because yeah, you're right. Not everybody has the maturity to be able to understand the potential in the situation that they're in. Because there's like potential around. I think, was it you and I talking about it? Because I just had two other podcast interviews. But somebody was saying that everything you could possibly want is like basically right in your phone. Was it you, Dan Martell? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like it's right there. Exactly. Yeah. So there you go. Good job, John. So yeah, I mean, it's right there. Like you can figure it out. But sometimes it takes a little bit of maturing to realize what you actually want, what you want in life. There were other kids and students there that were maybe mid-20s because they were in the military, and then they came back for school. And those, you could tell the difference in maturity just by they'd be like 24, 25, somewhere around that age. I was almost 10 years older than that, but you get the idea. I could see that they had a different mindset as well because they had some time to mature. So I do agree with you. Not everybody's fit for college and not everybody's fit to go right after high school. I think it's worth taking what they call a gap year and doing other things, working or whatever it might be, to kind of explore some options. There are some different people out there too. When I was in community college, there were students who were in high school getting their associates at the same time, finishing early. I think it's called early college or whatever. One girl in my calculus class, she wanted to be an actuary. And she was like not even 18. She knew what she wanted to be. Like most people probably don't even know what an actuary is. Yeah. But if you need insurance, an actuary is who sets your rates. If you want to go gamble in Vegas, talk to an actuary before you go there. So they understand risk and all that. Yeah, phenomenal. I was like, how the heck? I knew what that was at the time. How the heck did you figure that out? So, some people are just on that path. That's not everybody though.
Yep, for sure. All right, so let's get back to your path. So it sounds like you were kind of set up after college to dive into real estate investing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So going through a lot of trial and error with interviews. I actually got no job offers. It was time to graduate like 3 months ahead of time or whatever. Reached out to a potential employer, not even a potential employer, just through a connection or whatever. Just asking for advice, like what the heck should I do? They ended up offering me a job. The company's called 10 Federal, based out in Raleigh, North Carolina. Some of them might know they created the Da Vinci lock and
how'd you find them?
All that. They're in Raleigh, so I was in school in Chapel Hill, and I just reached out to them directly because Cliff, they're two brothers, Brad and Cliff. Cliff graduated from Carolina, so there's a connection there. Yeah, exactly. So you use your network. I was actually just thinking that before this podcast. I was like, tapping into networks is a way, because I want to grow my podcast and all that. So thinking about ways, but yeah, the network is critical. Anyway, so reached out to them. They made me a job offer. Great. I was going to be their director of acquisitions, which is a fancy title for bird dog. Go find deals. Go find deals. So that's what I did. I had no idea what I was doing, but tried to figure that out through trial and error. And that's when I would listen to Bigger Pockets. I think we talked about that on my podcast. Talk about Brandon Turner and those guys, Brandon Turner and I forgot his name, the founder of Bigger. Yes, Josh Dorkin. Remember listening to them? And I started at episode 1, and then I realized, oh, they've been doing this for a couple of years already, so I should probably start the most latest episode. So I did that and worked my way backwards. I have so many notes on my phone from listening to it and like stopping it and then doing like a voice memo of the notes, because it wasn't commercial, it was residential, but you can take a lot of things from the residential space. Brandon Turner is the first person that helped me understand what like a deal flow funnel was. I credit that to Brandon Turner because I didn't fully understand that whole process, but he did like an episode on it or something like that and helped me understand it. Anyway, we pivoted. So I couldn't make we had 2 multifamily deals under contract. They both fell apart. Just to make a long story short, getting really frustrated. We met with some guys to help us raise equity for multifamily. They said, hey guys, this isn't that exciting what you're doing in multifamily. Brad was telling them about storage just to give them a little idea of what we do. Everybody at the table is like, oh, if you're doing any more storage, let us know because we'd like to throw some money in with you. We got back to the office that afternoon and we were like, why don't we do something in storage? Because everybody gets excited about that when we talk to them and nobody cares about what we're doing in multifamily. We're like, okay. So Brad was like, we're going to raise our first fund, put it on Crowd Street. At that time, Crowd Street was like early in their platform. This is 2017, I want to say, end of 2016, beginning of 2017, something like that. And so we did all that. I put together the OM, the offering memorandum. I worked with the attorneys to do the PPM. I didn't create it, of course, but helped all that stuff. So I was there the early days. I was there when they created the Da Vinci lock version, C. Now they're already out to market and overseas and all that stuff. But the original version of that, I was there for that. Not the original, but just early days of that. Yeah. And then, so I realized comparing, I didn't even know, bro, there was like no storage information. What the heck? They owned like 3 facilities at the time, like a 30,000 square foot in Alston Avenue in Durham. That's the one we used for our case study in the offering memorandum. And then they were building a small 15,000 square foot using Live Oak Bank and SBA loan nearby. And then I think they had 1 or 2 others, maybe 3 or 4 small facilities. And that was it, man. That was it. They owned like 4 times as much multifamily storage at the time.
Really?
So I had some P&Ls I could use to kind of get me going, and understanding some of the expenses. But bro, I had to like Google how to do self-storage. There was nothing. There was Mark Helm's book, Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage. There was Scott Myers, which I went to his syndication summit in Nashville, Tennessee in 2017. And then and then there was like some, articles and things out there. And I found like Inside Self-Storage and I found the Self-Storage Association and the Self-Storage Almanac. And that's where I got a lot of the information on the industry was from those resources. But there wasn't anything out there, really at that time. I don't remember if there was even a podcast. I don't think there was on the space. So anyway, that's the other pivot, was comparing the 2 asset classes of multifamily and storage and realizing the great opportunity that there is in the storage space to buy mom and pops and all that stuff. So that was a big pivotal moment. That's where I want to focus on the storage aspect of things. So yeah, that's the origin story.
No, that's awesome. Well, I'm just going to say, I don't have it. Keep going. I mean, you're at 10 federal.
Yeah. Okay. Going. So we're at 10 federal. So I found the first, I think it was like 5 deals or whatever. The first one we ever did was on LoopNet. It was on South Point. I found it on LoopNet, just scouring LoopNet, South Point Road in Belmont, North Carolina. Anybody can look it up on Google Maps. It's no longer called 10 Federal. I think as of the time of this recording, I think it's called Lotus Self-Storage, although that guy might have sold. I'm not sure. But it's on South Point Road, Belmont, North Carolina. Smaller deal. Found it on LoopNet. The pictures on LoopNet showed the roof was like weird, like it was damaged or something. This just wasn't correct. It would look bad. Something was wrong. Called the broker. He said, oh, no, those must be old pictures that are just being picked up from Google, like the satellite image, because a storm went through and destroyed the roof and then they fixed it. So that's what you're seeing is the destroyed roof from before. It's like, oh. It turned out the husband and the wife built the facility like row by row, kind of. I think, I can't remember the size. It was under 30,000 square feet. I don't remember exactly. But he had passed, this is like, they built it, call it 15, I don't remember, 20 years before we actually came along, something like that. And then the husband had passed away about 6 months prior to them listing it for sale. So they had some interest, but no takers just yet. She was running the thing. Her name is Debbie. And they still, I think they still own, it's called Sail Away Bay or something like that. It's like a boat storage / repair shop. It's like down the road. So they owned both of those at the time. And they had, when we went under contract, she had 40 units that she had no idea who was even renting from her. Most of them didn't even have locks on the doors. That was the only time I ever found anything of value in a storage unit, because she gave, I know you're not supposed to do this, but she gave me like a tub of like old baseball and sports cards.
Yeah.
It was just a tub of them. And I was like looking through them like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. So anyway, yeah, so we closed that. By the time we closed, she had cleaned out 10 units. So there was 30 still that needed to be trashed out. So we got that taken care of. There was really, I can't remember, there was no website. She was using like Windows 95 to run the place. So we revamped the office, redid everything. Did like the unattended remote managed, it's called remote managed now, but it was all unmanned back then. And yeah, they sold it. I had left the company. It was like 2 years in, I left the company, but they sold it. We bought it for like 1.3, I think it was, and then put in some CapEx, call it 1.5 altogether. And they sold it for like 2.3 or something like that, to like the Lotus guys. And I don't know if he sold it yet or not, but anyway, so it turned a nice profit on it in about, call it 2 years, 3 years, something like that, besides the cash flow. And then it went from, we took it from like, I don't know, low 70s occupancy up to almost 90% occupancy in 60 days. By literally just trashing out the units, repaving the drive aisles because they looked pretty bad, and repainting the facility because it was like different, like Frankenstein, like different colors. Each building was different colors. So we repainted the whole thing. And then got the occupancy up, and obviously that created cash flow later on. So yeah, it was a good story. And that's, I realized, oh my gosh, there's more of these, out there. So, and back then, man, everything seemed expensive, even today, like you hear new investors coming in and it's like, oh, I might've missed the boat or whatever. Shoot, I thought I missed the boat. Like you said on our interview earlier, you thought you'd missed the boat, like back in 2019 or whatever. Like there's always opportunity even today. So yeah, there's always opportunities. So that's yeah.
Yeah, sounds like you were there for a couple of years. What happened? Why'd you leave?
My wife's mom came down with like it wasn't full on dementia, but they live, the in-laws live in Charlotte. So we were living in Raleigh, that area at the time. And she was going through a lot of health issues. So we thought it might be best to move back over here. So, and quite honestly, like it was kind of a tough time. Like it was just tough. It was just time to part ways is all it comes down to. Like personally, financially, with my in-laws, it was just time to come back. Her own family lives here in Charlotte. So sister lives here. Actually, they live in the same neighborhood as us, which can get kind of awkward sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. So anyway, yeah. So we came down here. I worked for some friends of mine. They had a home building company. They wanted to go do storage as well. So I worked in the company and then looked for storage deals also. That didn't work out. So then like on my Instagram and whatever else, I have like 2 failed partnerships. So that it wasn't failed. We're still friends to this day. I actually get together with dinner for them not too long ago. But it just didn't work out because you have to, in a partnership, you need to have alignment of interests, alignment of expectations. And then like there's one other thing and I forgot it off the top of my head, but
morals, ethics, values. Exactly.
That's what it was. Yeah. An alignment of values. Yeah. Right. And so it's like the trifecta of partnerships, I call it. And so you need to have those 3 in place. It's okay for them not to 100% fit all the time because you might have a little bit of differences in some things and maybe some vision changes over time or whatever. You got to be flexible. But the point is like the partnership didn't work because they felt more comfortable continuing on single family homes versus actually investing in deals sometimes. Because yeah, you can make a 15% return on a single family home because they would build them. And so, yeah, I get that. If you can turn that 15% and like build it, sell it within 6 months. Okay. I would do that too. Like, I don't think I'd go use storage. You have to hold it for 5 years to make a 15% average return or whatever, but you get the cash flow, you get some other things that come along with that. So I understand you also are taking on risk because at some point you may not be able to sell a home, right? So now you're carrying the note and there's a problem there. So I get it. Like there's a trade-off there. So anyway, it just wasn't aligned. And then I worked for another group, partners with another group, another couple of guys, plenty of money, all that stuff, values aligned, definitely interest aligned, 100%. They wanted to do storage. expectations didn't align because the returns weren't where they wanted them to be. They were doing like mezzanine loans and other things. And so they would get, literally like 18% on their money, which is very risky. But they felt comfortable with that. So if you look at the returns in buying and holding real estate for a long time, it doesn't really work that way. You're not going to get that. You're taking risk doing these types of like mezz loans and all that stuff. But they still felt more comfortable with that. And the expectations on the storage didn't really pan out, So anyway, so that didn't work out. So I was like, golly, I'm gonna do this for myself. Got another partner, John, and everything aligned. Like perfect, great, awesome. We're trucking. We got 2 deals on a contract in Charlotte. Passive Investing called me up, said, hey, we want to do storage. Let's go do storage together. I knew one of the founders before he actually ever bought any multifamily or anything like that. So we were friends. And so he's like, great. So that's when expectations, vision, and values all aligned. And so that's how we went from 0 to 130 million, in 2 years. And that's the value of like finding the right partnership. It takes a little bit of trial and error. You kind of learn along the way. But once you have it, it can be very, very prosperous for everybody.
Yeah. So it sounds like, cause I've done everything on my own. Probably cause there's probably a lot of reasons, but probably control freak's probably one of them. Or I like to be in control, maybe not control freak. So why did you keep looking for, and obviously this is not just a question, why'd you keep looking for partners? How'd they keep finding you? Why not do it completely on your own?
What's funny is that they found me. John found me on Bigger Pockets. He was asking, he lives here in Charlotte. So he was like, hi, somebody in Charlotte does storage, and people said, Kris, you need to reach out to him. So he reached out to me, sent me a message on Bigger Pockets. We met for coffee, and then we realized, I think we have a lot of things in common here. So we kept meeting and said, hey, let's form a partnership. So it kind of came about naturally. I wasn't really looking for anybody at that time. And then it was kind of the same thing, like the network thing. I didn't really try to find a partner. People just found me and said, hey, do you want to partner? And I said, sure. Because if you are going to go do deals, you can do it with seller financing and all that stuff, but it helps to like, okay, if I'd rather go do a 40,000, like it's like the difference between doing the single family homes, nothing wrong with that. Right. But you can buy one single family home, or you could buy 100 units, like in a multifamily property. That's why a lot of people make the switch to multifamily. It's the same thing in storage. You can buy 100 units of storage, or we could go buy 1,000. If I had more money at one time, and we can hire a third-party management company to take care of that for us. And then we just go and keep finding the next deal. So that really was appealing to me. Like, why not? Ultimately,
you had the skill sets that people are looking for and the network. So aligned, that makes sense. Are you more of a visionary or integrator?
Visionary. Yeah. Okay. So rocket fuel and all that. Yeah. More of a visionary. The integrator part I can do, like that's what I'm doing now on my own, but it's visionary. I get 57 ideas. And actually I was like frustrated because I'm like, this is recent, like a week ago, like 2 weeks ago. I was like, man, why am I built this way? I know that it's good, right? When you have all the pieces in place, but when you're by yourself, it can be very frustrating because you have a lot of vision and a lot of like things that we could do this, we could do that, but it takes bridging. You can see Z, but you got to get from A to Z, right? So you need LMNOP, all the things in between, and that takes time and other things, other resources sometimes. So, but yeah, definitely a visionary.
Were your other partners integrators?
Yeah, John, integrator all the way. If you met him, John Allen, if you met him, he's a CPA by trade. Worked for a family office as their CFO. So he's a numbers guy, can get everything done. No problem there whatsoever. So that's why we make a really good partnership. We're technically, he and I talking Monday, like whatever, next Monday, today's Thursday. So we're technically like not partners now. We don't have a company together. Obviously still friends. So we're trying to figure out like next steps. Like what does he want to do? What do I want to do? Because he and I both parted ways with passiveinvesting.com. So we're trying to figure out like the next steps now. So We'll see. Yeah.
Well, as long as you're okay talking about it, and I have no idea what happened, but why did you leave passive investing?
Well, it's a combination of one. I try to be open book. We couldn't raise money to do more deals. And so the way that it's
been tough to raise money past year, 2 years.
It has. Let me get a drink real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not the only one.
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't raise any more money to do more deals. And I say couldn't, I'm sure we could if we were like to ring up a couple people's arms or something like that. But it was just way slowed down.
Yep.
So the way that I was paid at Passive, the way that we were onboarded, for example, before I joined Passive, and I'm looking for deals on my own and all that, I was teaching real estate I have my real estate license for the state of North Carolina. So I was teaching real estate license law classes. I actually really enjoy doing that. So like teaching, speaking, as you can probably tell, I can talk a mile a minute, and I enjoy it. So I was teaching for the state, and that pays the bills. Obviously not enough, but it pays the bills. And it was enjoyable for the most part. And they didn't care what you do outside of the classroom. So I was looking for deals and interviewing people, doing my podcast at that time. And when Passive called, they said, hey, let's get you over here. Okay, great. What does that look like? Well, they just paid us a draw to start out. So they said, hey, here's how you get onboarded. We'll pay you a draw. Well, how much do you need? Okay, we need X. Okay, we can do that. We get paid when we close a deal, we get paid acquisition fees. The fees that come in will go to pay back the draw. Once that's paid back, we're done with that. And you're just going to keep making money through acquisition fees. And then we had the first deal we did was just like a single syndication. And then after that, we did 2 funds. And the last deal we did was a single syndication as well. So we raised 2 funds afterwards. So after that first small deal. So it made sense. Like, hey, we have the money. We know we have the capital to go do deals. So I felt comfortable doing that. They'd already proven a track record at that time. They had like 300 million, I think, almost 400 million closed in multifamily. I think they hadn't done car wash yet. So in multifamily. So it was a fantastic opportunity. Like, yeah, okay, that works for both me and John. So we ended up paying that back they didn't even pay the whole thing. We calculated it based upon like an annual salary and then just paid that monthly. And whatever fees came in went to pay back what was already paid. That's how a draw works. Payback was already paid out. And if there's anything extra, you just get the leftover and then the draw stops. So we paid it back within 6 months, I think it was, or something like that, pretty quick, which is great. So we get paid after that through K1 income, right? So investment income. So you get some acquisition fees and all that. You get asset management fees because we had the 2 funds. So you get some asset management fees because we are asset managing the properties and making sure they're running smoothly or whatever, which they didn't run very smoothly, which we can talk about too. So that's how we got paid. So for not doing deals, right? And I'm not an employee. How do we make money? Well, we can't, so we have to kind of figure that out. And so that's what happened. And so that goes back to on our episode for my show that we recorded earlier. Do you want to own a small slice of the watermelon or do you want to own the whole grape? Well, if you own the whole grape, you're not worried about somebody taking away or losing your role or position or whatever, right? So they did pay us out, like, of course, like our shares of what we owned up to that point. Like that's how you invest in the deals. You buy shares in the LLC. If anybody doesn't know, that's how you split up like the ownership of the property. You own shares of the LLC based upon how much money you put in or sweat equity or whatever. And so you get that percentage of the cash flow as well. So that's how we did it. So we got paid out and like we can't go, like they couldn't go do any more deals. And so we're good. Like it wasn't like a thing of like, hey, I don't like you anymore or interpersonal issues, nothing like that. It was just, guys, the business is coming to an end. And that's what it comes down to. It was really, this is the first time I'm really actually talking about it in any depth. But it was a really emotional time. I was not in a good place when it happened like 6 weeks ago, because you're hoping like this is the future. Like we just bought $130 million. We want to go do more. Of course, we're in a slow part, but let's get through it and the market will come back and we'll be okay. And, we have ownership in these deals. We can either sell them or refinance them. And that's your upside, your payout, your bonus, if you will. Just like when you refinance a property that you own, you get like a nice return on that. And then you can go do whatever you want to do with that. So it felt like, oh man, this is great. This is setting us up for the future. And all that is now gone, like taken away. If you've ever seen, there's a guy, he wrote a book a while ago and did a thing called From Fit to Fat to Fit, where he was like a fitness trainer. He was like fit and then he got fat on purpose and then he got fit again. And he like blew up because he did this whole journey and whatever and showed how he did it, documented the whole thing. So that's how I feel. From 0 to 1, back to 0, and now trying to get back to 1 again. If you think of it in binary terms. So
anyway, I'm sure you will. Well, again, one, thanks for sharing because not many people do. I mean, there are not going to name names. I don't need name names, but there are definitely people in the space, big names in the space that are syndicators that are struggling, pausing distributions, laying off people. Like there's a bunch of people doing that. You're not the only one. And it's not talked about. Like from the outside looking in, it seems like everything's rosy and deals are, everything's going great. It's not the case. I don't know. I know they do recessions. How do they figure it out? It's like, what is it? 3 or 5 years afterwards. Then they go back and say, oh yeah, we were in a recession then.
Yeah. They look back.
I have a feeling we could be in a recession or have been for a little while, but
yeah, I mean, they measure, the media will tell you otherwise, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. Like, bro, I saw it's nuts for car payments. Like one of our cars is paid off and we have a car payment on the other one. It's like it's low. But like, dude, what the heck? I sent my wife a video from YouTube, a short, like the other day with this, I guess they're at a dealership. I'm not sure, but the guy's going around on camera saying, Jessica or whatever the person's name is, you got a car payment. How much is it? And they tell, and it's like over $1,000 for every single one of these. That blows my mind. Like, what the heck? And we looked at, we have an SUV for the kids and all that. And we looked at getting another one. And I'm like, there is no way I refuse to pay like $1,200 a month for a car payment, which is about what it would be if you bought a brand new one. You pay cash for an older one, I understand, but I was just trying to see what the numbers look like. And I'm like, nope, we're keeping what we have. I don't care. I don't even care. So yeah, it's insane. So right now that's to go along with what you said about, the economy and other groups and all that. I don't know who out there, but I know that, it's tough right now. I can just speak for us. We had to pause distributions on everything storage related, except for one of our deals, which was fine. But number one, nobody underwrote interest rates spiking, the highest and fastest they've ever gone in like 20 or 40 years? I don't remember, but just spiking like crazy. If anybody thought that, nobody would do any deals right during 21 and 22. So that happened. And then that put a damper on everything. Like people weren't moving and, like storage rents dropping everywhere. So yeah, it was a bad combination of some things that were outside of all of our control. That's really what happened. Like, and then investors like, okay, why would I invest with you if I can get 5% in like my savings account? My Ally Bank savings account is literally almost at 5%. Like, why the heck would I put that into a real estate deal when the returns are like 6 or 5, or less than that year one? That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's really difficult, but I think it will come back when interest rates, if they continue to decline, who knows? But you'll see it come back around, or you'll see pricing adjust, at properties, or you'll see more creative financing structures, seller financing, etc. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So what, and we do have to start wrapping up a little bit, and I apologize, but I do want to, you said something about some of your deals, they didn't run the way they should have. Why was that?
Oh yeah. Management. So, number one, I take the responsibility for that because I wasn't keeping my eye on the ball as closely as I should have. And 2, we didn't fit the model for the facility. So unattended remote management works great. You can make it work. No problem. There's a lot of tools out there. We did it at 10 Federal. It's a great system. There are problems. The one time at 10 Federal, that first deal, the gate failed. And since nobody's on site, 2 people were stuck behind the gate. One guy had a job interview. He was pissed. And then another lady was really mad. She moved out. She ended up moving to a competing facility nearby. It was funny because later on we bought that same one like 3 months later or whatever. It was really funny. But anyway, so that lady had nowhere else to go. Yeah. But so there are problems with it. However, when you go and buy a Class A facility, remove the manager, put in a remote management system, people at that Class A facility feel like they're getting less service for the same amount of money. Then you raise rents, and now they feel like they're getting even less service for even more money. And that doesn't bode well. You can structure that and accomplish that in such a way where people don't feel that way. If you have 600 tenants, call all of them as the new owner, let them know, blah, 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 we're here, so and so forth. Don't hit them with rate increases right away, of course, because you don't want the move outs. People are going to move out. Doesn't matter when you buy a new facility, they're going to move out. Some will move out. But you don't want that to happen en masse. And then when you try to backfill, it becomes more difficult because they leave bad reviews and you have to fight those bad reviews. So that's part of it's a downward spiral at a facility. Then they go remote. and then people leave trash behind, and then that piles up, and then it starts to look like a dump at the facility. So then they feel like they're getting even less value now, and then they start moving out. So that is not how you want to run it. I have difference of opinions now in certain things, but we made some of those mistakes. We hired third-party management. We had to fire them. We brought in a new third-party management company, and they did a great job for us in turning the ship around. We bought a lot of lease-up deals too, which was fine. There's nothing wrong with the lease-up deal, but you got to just lease it up properly. And running it remotely with the way that the company was doing it, it just didn't work. So that's what it comes down to. And so by the time we left, most everything was at stabilized or close to it. So we didn't leave it in bad shape, which is good. Cash flow wise, we wanted it to be better, but we can't control. That was one of the big lessons. I know we've got to wrap it up here, but one of the big lessons I learned was the market is what the market is. So if on average rents, let's just use an easy number. If rents are $100 on average in the market, you shouldn't expect to raise them to 110, right? If your property is below that, let's say it's at 75 or whatever, sure, you get to 80, you get to 85 over time, maybe 100 at some point in time in the future, but you shouldn't, the market is what it is. So when rents are declining, it's really hard for you to keep those rents up. It's just not something you can do. It's the tide, like the ocean. You can't do much about it. If rents are increasing, great, ride that wave. But when they're going down, you got to bring them down to keep that occupancy. An occupancy story is much better to sell and talk about than a higher rent, low vacancy story. You can work with higher occupancy and low rent. It's really hard to work with high asking rents and low occupancy because you got nobody there. You know, like how are you going to backfill? How are you going to lease up if you can't get them in the door? That's why the REITs, people don't like the REITs or whatever, but they do have the strategy down. Get it low, get them in the door, and then mess with it from there.
Yeah, then start cooking them from there.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And it's
and I'm sure you know, obviously, you've gone through probably somewhat difficult path, but your skill sets are unbelievable at this point, right? Not only acquiring, raising money, all that, but operating too. You've learned so much. And it's going to be one of the questions I'm going to ask here, but I'm excited to see what you do next. So before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a few questions that we do with the pod, and then we'll start wrapping up here. So what's one thing that you're better at than everybody else?
Teaching. So just explaining, taking a concept that's hard to understand and making it easier to understand, making it simple to understand. So yeah, if you think of like internal rate of return, so that kind of like a lot of investors and guys who recently started raising money, they don't explain that very well or don't know what that means. It's not hard to understand. I'm sorry, it is hard to understand. It's not hard to explain. So, so stuff like that, taking something complicated, making it easy to understand. And I enjoy doing it. So that's my skill.
That's awesome. And I have a feeling my next question is going to tie into that. What's next for you?
Expand the podcast, grow that. I like to, get that to a place where it's maybe some long form interviews. I like to get the sponsorship up. There's a podcast called Acquired. I think it's just called Acquired. It's a business podcast. And, ideally, if I can bring value to the audience through stories and interviewing interesting people, maybe even a long form content, I think I can get the podcast sponsored and make decent money through that. And obviously, bring in revenue for the advertisers, et cetera. So the Acquired podcast, last I checked to sponsor episodes, I think they do it by seasons or something. It's like $500,000, which is insane. Would I ever get there? I hope so, but it would take a long time. They've been doing it since 2017, of course. So it takes time. That's the other part too. You have the vision, but then it's like, let's do it tomorrow, but you can't. It takes like time to get there. But I could see myself doing something like that, being the Joe Rogan of the business world or of the real estate investing world. I like to do the Acquired for like real estate version of that podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool, man. Well, excited to see what you're going to do and where you're going to go with the podcast and everything. I'm sure people have questions and want to find you. Where can they find you? storageinvestorshow.com. That website is getting worked on right now. Should be live by the time this episode comes out. I don't know when it'll be out, but should be live by then. But storageinvestorshow.com. You can always send me an email, Kris, Kris, at storageinvestorshow.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and YouTube. Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, again, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing your story. Definitely an interesting story, probably a little bit different from other people we've had on, but excited to see what you're going to do next, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Yeah, different is like my motto. It's been my motto in life. So it's really good, man. Appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Appreciate everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for following, subscribing, and listening to this episode of the Do More podcast hosted by John Farling. To learn more or ask questions, go to l4investing.com.